Hey everybody, welcome to the Song Revolution podcast, brought to you by Nashville Christian Songwriters. Nashville Christian Songwriters exists to empower Christian songwriters worldwide. I'm John Chisholm, and this podcast exists to bring you valuable songwriting insights, inspiration, interviews, and just all around good fun with some of the greatest songwriters, producers, arrangers, artists, and creatives, and beyond. You can find out a whole lot more about us at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have you hanging out with us here on the Song Revolution. Today, my guest is LifeWay Worship's creative director, Craig Adams. Now, this guy is talented. He is a great player, great singer, great songwriter. He comes from a family of gospel musicians and ministers, and this guy is on fire for the Lord, and he publishes thousands of songs with LifeWay Worship every year. LifeWay Worship is one of the largest publishers, if not the largest, in Nashville, and they publish everything from children's music up to adult music, and Craig's right in the heart of it. Craig is in touch with what's going on in worship in the world today, and he shares some very valuable insights on this episode that will help you know what the current trends are. Some very interesting conversation in this episode today. So, hey, as always, jump over to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com and check out everything we've got going on over there, especially our upcoming NCS Weekend Intensive, where you can come hang out with people like Craig Adams. So without any further ado, please welcome to the Song Revolution podcast, our buddy, Craig Adams. Craig Adams, welcome to the Song Revolution podcast.
Thank you, John. It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you, buddy. Creative director at LifeWay for how many years now?
12 and a half.
12 and a half.
And the half counts.
So and it does. It does, man. Every month represents how many songs for you, right?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's very true. Very true.
So how many songs do you think you've published in your 12 and a half years?
Well, I know that I can get at it kind of this way. Over the course of a year, between all the musicals and anthems that we release for church choirs and orchestras, and all the collections there, Vacation Bible School, student worship resources, all the albums that we're creating, we are filling roughly 1,000 song slots a year. And so we're listening to, it's usually about a 6 to 10 to 1, between 6 and 10 songs you're going to listen to for every one you're going to say, okay, that one sticks. So the amount of songs that we're considering in a year's time is pretty astronomical at the end of the day. And I'm saying I'm not personally listening to all this myself.
Right.
I wouldn't have time to sleep if that were the case. But our team, one way or another, is diving through that kind of volume. So, but as daunting as that sounds, the reality is we could be doing a lot of other things that would be far less fulfilling and far less fun at the end of the day. I mean, it's a great thing to be able to become at least some semblance of a gatekeeper for the church. That's the privilege that we count as a team, and we take it very seriously. Certainly, I would say we probably miss things here and there now and then, but our number one objective on the song level is to be able to deliver songs and resources to churches that are going to be transformational on the discipleship level. And so a lot of songs to dive through, but it really is very rewarding and fun work to be able to meet people like you who have given their lives to creativity and to ministry, and the relationships that we build with songwriters is one of the greatest treasures for me of everything that we do.
That's fantastic. And I know that you and your family have a very strong musical background that we talked about last summer when you did the masterclass for our members.
Yeah, that's right.
Writing modern worship songs. I know we talked a lot about that.
Sure.
And when we did a Facebook Live one day where you talked about your dad.
That's right.
And
just
the legacy of your family in ministry over these years. Yeah. And so your ministry has continued to touch literally millions of people through LifeWay worldwide. And I'm not sure that our listeners would know that LifeWay is a nonprofit organization.
It is.
Not necessarily a typical music company.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's since its inception, actually, J.M. Frost started the company in his garage publishing Sunday school curriculum. Nobody was doing it at that point in time. And he said, man, I see a need here for people to study the word together, started it and set up the charter for what became eventually the Baptist Sunday School Board. He set it up so that several trustees, who would be pastors, theologians, professors from Southern Baptist churches and institutions, would look after the business together of the company. But from the very get-go, he set it up as a not-for-profit so that all the monies left over would go back to the cooperative program for the Southern Baptist denominations earmarked for missions. So I tell people a lot, there are hard days at work no matter what you do for a living. If you're flipping burgers, selling cars, teaching school, preaching at a church, or working at a music company, there are days that are harder than others. Mm-hmm. But man, it is a really cool thing at the end of the day to say, as a team or as an individual, everything that we worked hard to do today means that somewhere there's a Southern Baptist missionary who doesn't have to raise support. Wow. I love that about the LifeWay organization. It's so deeply entrenched in the DNA, not only of the history of the company, but I think you would find just about anybody you talk to at the company, they're all going to be dedicated to that initiative, right? On a very deep spiritual level. It's a very unique thing.
That's awesome. And what a privilege to get to use your gifts. Like I said, you're very musical. You play incredibly well. Your voice, you have one of the greatest singing voices, man. And I know you've done a lot of that through the years. Are you leading at a church these days?
I am. Yeah. It's actually a really unique situation. I live in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. Mm-hmm. And Cliff Duran, good mutual friend of ours, who serves at a church here in town at Station Hill. He had a pastor friend in, of all places, Athens, Alabama. And Pastor Tim Anderson there at Clements has been there 27 years, I think it is now. He started the church there. He and Cliff had done several things together itinerantly, and he called Cliff and he said, man, I've been without a worship leader for a year. I think I've got somebody coming who's going to fill the job, but I've got 3 weeks. I need somebody to bridge the gap. Can you recommend anybody? And Cliff said, you know what? You ought to call my buddy Craig and see if he'd be willing to come down. So the pastor called me. We talked. I said, man, I'd love to come down and help you. And long story short, in between that phone call and my first Sunday, the guy that he thought he had coming, things didn't work out for whatever reason. And so by the end of 3 weeks, man, I had hit it off with Tim Anderson in extraordinary ways. I mean, literally at a handshake. I'm sure you've had this happen before, John, but with a pastor, it was just a really special thing. At a handshake, I felt like I'd known this guy my entire life. There was a deep spiritual connection at a hello, And as I heard him preach, I was like, man, this guy is an extraordinary leader. And then over the course of the 3 weeks that I was there were literally, first Sunday, there were 7 teenagers baptized. The next week, there were 11 people baptized. The next 5 people baptized. And I thought to myself, I don't know when I've been to 3 weeks back to back where I've seen the evidence of that many people coming to Christ, And I thought, man, I'm just glad I was in the room today to be a part of that. And so I had lunch with the pastor, and long story short, I've been there since then.
How many years?
And that's 3.5, almost 4 years now.
That's fantastic.
And it's been a beautiful thing. It's an hour and 20-minute drive from Franklin. So I go down and back on Wednesday nights for rehearsals midweek. Wow. And then my wife and I go down Saturday night, stay in a hotel down there every Saturday night just to make sure we don't run into car trouble or an interstate shutdown or something. Right. And the church is very gracious to provide that for us. And it's an amazing thing. You drive 12 miles off of I-65 to the west, and you're out in the middle of canola and cotton fields. And literally out in the middle of nowhere is this church of about 800 people that have been there, like I said, 27 years started. They planted in a double-wide trailer on the property, and have grown this campus that now has a gymnasium, family life center,
so good,
sanctuary that seats 900. And I mean, the first thing I noticed when I walked in is the AV system in this place is just unsurpassed. I mean, just an incredible system. And it's because of the guy now who works as an assistant in ministry to me there. His name's Daniel Beard. Daniel used to work at Integrity Studios years ago and has a deep background in AV. And so he's at the church and was kind of over media ministry. He had taken over that. And now he and I kind of work side by side. He's boots on the ground throughout the week. Yeah. And I kind of cast vision and we work very closely. But it's because of him that this church has so much technology available in the sanctuary in terms of AV. Yeah, and it's quality, and he knows what he's doing.
Well, you know, what I love about this is that you're a practitioner. You know, you're not just sitting in an ivory tower down at LifeWay, downtown Nashville, you know, trying to come up with the next greatest worship song, but you are actually, you know, practicing worship leading and your leadership in that area in the local church, which that's absolutely fantastic.
Well, I love the church. I've been in it my entire life. My family's been in church ministry. My granddaddy was a pastor of many Nazarene churches actually down through the years. And I just love God's church. I love the bride of Christ, and I love serving there. And particularly at this congregation, it's just a privilege. So, you know, it's a unique thing.
Well, it shows, man, and the fruit of your ministry is global, but also practiced on a local level. So I think that's amazing.
Praise
you
God
have
for
the
that.
purview of, you know, of a publisher and a songwriter and a worship leader, you know, so you get the full range of things. And I think sometimes we can get myopic in what we're doing in any of those, but you get to practice every week, you know, having a broad scope of all those things. And I think that's what makes you so amazing and not just talented, but called in a way to serve the body that, you know, very few people get to do. And I know that that's challenging because I've sat in that seat before. So I know the challenges that come with that. And I've thought back as we were planning to do this podcast today. You're going to be a speaker, a clinician for us at our upcoming NCS Weekend Intensive.
Man, thank you for the opportunity. I am really genuinely looking forward to that.
Oh, it's going to be fun. Yeah, it's going to be a blast and the first of many times. But I know that the topic that we're planning for you, we haven't landed on a particular title.
Right.
But it's kind of a continuation. It's really around, well, I'll let you reveal it in a moment. But for me, it's somewhat of a continuation from our masterclass last June. It was one of my favorites that we've done. I love all of them, but you're so knowledgeable and you're just in the thick of it. And your perspective on what's happening globally in worship, I know you're going to talk about that in a moment, is pretty stellar. And so when I think about some of the topics, some of the swings, the trends that we hope are returning, you know, to music in the church, I'm very hopeful. In fact, since last June, my heart has been very hopeful because I write more in some of the ways that we talked about last year. And so, you know, kind of maybe selfishly, but a lot of the writers I work with tend to be more melodic and tend to be more doctrinally oriented or have not complex, but definitely more meat, you know, on the bones than maybe we've seen in the last 10 years or so. So you're coming to the intensive, but today we're going to talk maybe a little bit of a teaser of that talk. So why don't you kind of lead us into that if you don't mind, kind of what God's put on your heart around that?
Yeah, it's an exciting topic to talk about because I feel like there's a lot changing very rapidly. Since you and I talked last on this topic nearly a year ago, it's been interesting to see. I think the course of our discussion in those days, I was saying things to you like, man, I hope I'm not just about to turn 50 and becoming that guy who's going, well, I hope this happens and I hope this happens. I've really tried to keep the perspective of watching what God's doing on the local church level to see what's emerging and try not to get my own agenda or preference locked up in that. It's such a hard thing for any of us as worship leaders or songwriters even to go, man, I wish everybody would write a song this way, or I wish everybody would sing a song this way. But what's been exciting to me is a lot of the things that we were speculating might be on the horizon a year ago. A lot of that's beginning to come to fruition, and it's really exciting to me. My boss, Mike Harland, who's also a fantastic worship leader, long history in church music, and he's been at LifeWay now as the director of LifeWay worship for 13, almost 14 years now. He just returned actually to the office on Monday of this week from the Church Music Publishers Association conference out. It's held annually. Basically, church music publishers from all walks of church music. So it's not just mainline evangelical publishers, but you have folks who serve Lutheran churches and Catholic churches and Baptist churches and the Church of God. And, not all of them owned or operated by denominations, but each of them uniquely serving different pockets of the Christian church worldwide. So there were folks at this conference from all over the world who are publishing music in Brazil, in the UK, in Australia. And so it's a really unique conference that happens annually. And when Mike got back, we had a quick debrief in my office. I said, tell me, what are a couple of the hot button things that were talked about? He said, man, I'll tell you the first thing that comes to my mind is, he said there was a lot of chatter about what's happened since January of 2019 until March of 2019, what's happened on the CCLI top 100, but really top 20 list. It's been a radical shift. I said, well, tell me what you mean by that. He said, well, just one example. He said it was noted in a report that in December, at the end of 2018, when CCLI published their end of quarter report, Reckless Love was number one. And at that point, Living Hope by Phil Wickham was in the 400s. It was climbing rapidly. But once we get to the end of March for this current quarter's report, it's likely that Living Hope's going to be number one on that report. So that fast of a jump. I mean, typically songs move 10, 12, 20, maybe 50. Occasionally there's something that'll jump like 100, but to go from almost 500 to number one in 3 months is significant. And so people were talking about, well, songs move faster these days. They gain popularity faster these days because there's so many channels for them. I don't discount that at all. But I believe, John, it also says something about the fact that churches are hungry for a song like Living Hope. There's something unique about it. That song was mentioned in the report. Mike also said something about "Oh, Praise the Name, Anastasis" as another song. It's interesting, as you analyze those songs, John, as a songwriter, I think you'll get what I'm saying. They're not necessarily straight up hymnic. It's not like you can qualify them necessarily as what some people might consider a modern hymn. Right. But the language in those songs is a bit more hymnic. It's a little bit more hymnic in its poetry. But certainly there's an arc to tell the whole gospel story in both of those songs. I think that's interesting to take a look at in this day and age. But then musically, they're not a massive departure from the modern worship song that's kind of been the lane for the past 10 to 15 years. And so it's this unique hybrid that's emerging of a greater focus on the whole of the gospel story that I think is important to the church right now for whatever reason. Always has been, certainly, but it's reemerging as a place where I think people want to identify with the whole of the gospel and want to proclaim that together, as opposed to just one moment in their own story or in so. Does that make sense?
I think so. I mean, to me, it feels like there's just such a hunger for substance. And so many people have said, I've stopped listening to modern worship because, it's not substantial. It's insubstantial. It just doesn't really say a whole lot.
Yeah, and I have people say things like that to me myself quite a bit. And I'm not going to say that I don't have occasional, as a worship leader, I don't have occasional yearnings for something different myself. Meanwhile, I happen to be a father to an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old,
right,
who actually both lead worship every week in church for student worship. In fact, my son is kind of the team leader to organize all of that and help plan with the council and with the student pastor. So I'm careful to recognize that there's something about the modern worship song that is definitely the cry of a generation, heart cry of a generation, not unlike when I was their age.
Exactly.
Steve Green, Sandy, Patty, the days of what have now been called inspo were kind of the thing in church music. It was a different kind of song. It wasn't necessarily even congregational very often, but those songs really had deep impact on the church. So I want to be careful myself when I enter these conversations to say, I'm not really anti-modern worship songs because I recognize that there's something in the vernacular, musically and lyrically, that although it may not hit me always in the center of my chest, man, I can't deny I've been in the room when I see my own kids lead some of these songs that I just don't quite get.
Sure, yeah.
But man, is the Spirit of God undeniably moving in that room. So to me, it's not a question of value. And I know you weren't saying this, by the way, but just expounding on this a little bit, it's not a question of value so much as it is when we come together, all ages, into the sanctuary, kids, teens, young adults, middle-aged adults, senior adults, and we're all there to express our praise and worship to God in one voice, with one heart. What are those songs? That's what I really feel like the church, in addition to the things you've mentioned, because I do think there are a lot of churches who are saying, man, we want more substance. We want to sing the gospel. We want to sing meatier content. But I think they're also saying, we want to sing songs that on the whole help us all express together.
10,000 Reasons.
Exactly.
I mean, when that started sweeping the world a few years back, it's like, okay, now here's a substantive song. And no, I'm not negative or down on any person or writer or song. I mean, seriously, I feel like there's room for it all.
Yeah.
And no one person is going to write for all genres, all churches, all ages. Right. And we all have our cohort, our age group, if you will, that we love the kinds of songs that we grew up with. And, we're old rock and rollers now. I am anyway, a baby boomer, I'm still rocking and rolling, but
that's awesome.
I appreciate all of it. But when you look at a song like In Christ Alone that can be sung in any age group and bring meat and substance and value, 10,000 Reasons, name a few others, right? But there are those rare songs that can work in any age and genre and venue.
It brings to mind, I'm not sure if we talked about this last conversation or not, John, but I do have a little bit of a theory. I can't say this is gospel by any means because I don't have anything figured out, let alone everything. But I do have a little bit of theory about how trends in church worship, in congregational worship, actually tend to chase things that are unrelated to congregational worship. Like, for instance, I would just suggest, to the best of my memory, I was born in 1969, and I remember when my dad was a minister of music. I remember when flannel graph was introduced in Sunday school as a great communication tool.
Wow.
Because they were using it in schools, and suddenly every church gets wild and crazy about flannel graph, right? And if you're not using flannel graph and the little paper lollipop stick puppets, if you're not doing that, you're not doing the end thing, right?
Goodness.
And then when they found out how to speak kid language, churches went, well, we need to get more kids here. So we need to go buy school buses and paint them all with our church colors and bus people in. By the fleet, man, churches were buying these buses. And then when they got kids there in mass, suddenly in the middle of worship services, some people were like, man, these kids are noisy. We need to kick them out of the sanctuary and create kid church. Those kids graduate up into middle school, junior high, high school, and suddenly they don't want to do kid church anymore. So they create student worship, right? And then they graduate from high school and they've now had two completely separate cultures of worship in their lifespan. They start in children's church, worshiping one way, get to student ministry, have another culture of worship, and then they get out of high school and get into university or working age, and suddenly they don't really identify with what's happening in the sanctuary.
God, that's so true, Craig.
And so we kind of, with the right end game in mind, to try to minister to kids and to students with intentionality, we kind of created a problem for ourselves in the sanctuary, in that by the time kids graduate high school, they don't really know how to relate to the rest of the church's worship culture. And my theory is that contributed greatly to what became known as the worship wars, which was really more about style than anything. So on the backside, I mentioned all that to say, to affirm what you were saying, on the backside of all that, what I see happening in the emergence of songs like Living Hope is that suddenly songwriters are saying, as churches are now, by the way, inviting kids and students back into the sanctuary, because that's now the new emerging trend on the pastoral level is we've segregated everybody. The sanctuary is empty. It's really more about numbers. I have a suspicion than anything, honestly. Sure. Pastors want to preach to a full room. Who wouldn't, right? So, but let's bring everybody back in the sanctuary. And so suddenly worship leaders are discovering songs that all ages can identify with. And those are the songs that are rising really quickly. And Living Hope would be one of those, you know? So that's kind of a circuitous route to get there. But I really think oftentimes the things that we try to make theological and even political are really more practical when it comes to church worship. And I really believe, I love seeing that God is doing a new thing on the church level to bring all ages back together in one room. I think there's power in that generationally. And what an incredible opportunity for people who set their pen to lyric and notes to provide tools to those families to be able to worship together. Man, what a humbling and awesome opportunity and responsibility that is at this juncture.
And so to return to some of the major themes of Christendom, of the Bible, the Word, the cross, the blood, the love of God, all of those things would be probably, our NCS members' monthly challenge this month is to write a worship song without the words presence. What was the other one? Presence, and I think the word worship. It was 2 words. I know one was presence because there's so many present songs, right? So for songwriters who are wanting to write for this intergenerational kind of thing, the challenge would be to stick with the major themes, not just rehash, repeat everything that we've heard over the last couple of decades. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with it. And, adding some fuel to that, John, I don't know if you watched the morning news this morning, but when I woke up, I turned on the television and saw the news that the last count I heard was 49 people murdered in a Muslim mosque.
Did not.
Overseas. And, man, I sat there for a minute and thought, now more than ever, it's increasingly important all around the world to know what you believe. But just as quickly as you state that, in many places around the world, man, you can be killed for that.
Sure.
Even the song that you would sing in praise to glorify your God, how important is it that we not only provide the right theological architecture for people in the songs they sing, but teach them, even as songwriters, great theology? Because truthfully, there's enough of America now that has been unchurched for their entire lives that we are a post-Christian nation. And people don't like to talk about that. But man, it's important for the songs that we sing. If people are coming into the church with no church background, I think most of them probably expect in everything that takes place to find God. That's why they've come, right? Ultimately, they may have been invited by somebody, or they may have seen an ad for something special happening at a church somewhere. But if they've never known about Jesus, if they've never known church culture ever in their lives, I think they're probably coming because ultimately they want to find God.
Absolutely.
They want to have an experience. And so, man, again, what an incredible opportunity for the people of God who are poets, who are songwriters, to just tell people who Jesus is and what he's done, the full gospel story, the full measure of the impact in your life. I think that's why, again, churches are gravitating toward these songs because, to your point, there's substance there. It's not just, there's nothing wrong with the vertical expression where we've been living. But again, if you're unchurched, you can't step easily into that stream.
It's a foreign language.
Totally.
You're uninitiated. You're not on the reservation yet, so to speak, and you don't know what they're even talking about, you know? So absolutely. I had the privilege of being mentored and working for a season with Dr. Robert Weber, late Dr. Weber. He was amazing.
What a great opportunity.
Yeah, and so he would always talk about how church was all about reenacting the Christ event. He's such a scholar, right? And kind of on the academic, but it's a beautiful way to put it. He would talk about coming to the table, communion, as reenacting the death, burial, resurrection, ascension of Christ. And that everything in that act, kind of revisits that story. And I think that's what we see in these songs that are, in Christ Alone, I refer to that one a whole lot. Very hymn-like, very strophic in the A, B, the way that it works. Right. But very hymn-like, and yet there's so much substance. It tells the entire gospel. I think back to Rick Founds. Somebody said I should have Rick Founds on the show, and I'd love to. Awesome. Rick, if you're listening, love to have you on. But you came from heaven to earth to show the way. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That chorus told the entire gospel.
That's right.
And so anybody coming into a church, that song is a classic worship now, but that type of song, I don't think you can have too many of those.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Hey, we're going to take just a quick break from the show so that we can let you in on some amazing things happening around here at Nashville Christian Songwriters. Hey guys, John Chisholm here, and I want to invite you to come hang out with me and some very special friends at the upcoming NCS Weekend Intensive. The NCS Weekend Intensive is a 3-day coaching, teaching, and networking experience where you get to come to Nashville and meet my great pro songwriter and music business friends. People like Kenneth Turner West, who's written over 30 #1 songs, and John Mays, founder and A&R director of Centricity Music, home of great artists like Lauren Daigle, Jason Gray, Johnny Diaz, Andrew Peterson, and so many more. LifeWay Worship's creative director Craig Adams will be joining us in April, as well as the premier live music producer Tom Jackson, who's worked with a bunch of amazing people like Lecrae, Shawn Mendes, Francesca Battistelli, Phillips Craig and Dean, and a budding young talent you might remember, Taylor Swift. We've got 3 hands-on coaching sessions where you get real-time feedback on your songs to get you to the next level, and our stellar clinicians bring you world-class teaching to empower and inspire you like never before. And these events fill up fast, so we're offering a pre-registration option where you can register early and save $100, and that's a great deal for anybody. NCS Weekend Intensives are happening in April, July, and October, so you can get to the one that's right for you. Just jump over to NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com, click the Weekend Intensive link to read about it, and pre-register today. Hey, I'm looking forward to hanging out with you soon at the NCS Weekend Intensive. Well, I just hope that you'll take advantage of that and check it out. All right? We bring you good stuff here on the Song Revolution podcast. So back to our episode.
When you think about the things that have stuck for countless generations, even, the songs of Fanny Crosby or getting into rich hymnody, the things that have found songs that have found their way across thousands of years, they are the songs of doctrine and of firm belief, and there are many of personal testimony too, but the ones that tend to have the most staying power and seemingly the greatest impact are the ones of rich doctrine. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but really do tell the full gospel story.
Yeah, at least in some way. I mean, and I think just musically speaking, and you're such a great musician, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about this. I have a theory that the songs that last tend to have some kind of reference to early American intervals, like think of da 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 da, or da 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 ba na 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 na.
Yep.
I mean, those kinds of intervals, right? They kind of speak back to the Gaelic tradition, folk songs, right? Early American, that became the early American, right? I mean, so
your point is incredibly insightful, and I had not really thought about that before. The other thing that hits me with 10,000 Reasons to hear you sing that also is da 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 da. There's also something very Eastern about that, which makes you go, well, no wonder it's caught around the world the way it has.
Wow,
Not only in terms of American culture, but man, you take a mission trip anywhere in the world these days, you're going to hear how great is our God, and you're going to hear 10,000 Reasons. And
that's
it's interesting
so true,
to think about
right?
melodically.
Da, 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 da. So does that mean you can play it only on the black keys?
Maybe so. That'd be an interesting study.
You can play the whole song on the black keys. I love that. But I've noticed that over the last few years is that just the way the intervals work tend to be like da 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 da, that has that kind of familiar strain to it in some ways.
Yeah.
So
that's a great insight. It's amazing.
Yeah. So all you guys listening, go play on the black keys and
absolutely
see what it feels like.
And I hate playing on the black keys, man. The first key I ever learned to play in was C, and I love it because you don't have to do any of those weird tricks with your fingers. It's
Too
all white keys.
Too funny. Well, I've heard you play, and I know you're masterful at it.
Very kind.
But I think those are the kinds of things to pay attention to. That what's going on. The blend of modern with a little more of the hymn-like intervals and structures. We've been talking about this. I mean, do you think there's a huge wave that's coming or here? I mean, to jump on CCLI in 1 quarter.
Well, I mean, you kind of can't. CCLI is the best measuring stick that we have right now, even worldwide, I would suggest. So you can't deny when a song comes out of nowhere and jumps that far, that there's something at least unique about that song. But then when you weigh it against the other things that are rising too, to say it's a wave, I think it's entirely possible, maybe likely, that there's something new going on there. But that's what's exciting to me about worship anyway, is that because we serve a creative God, it's never the same. It's always moving toward something, and it's moving toward what he is. He's preparing us all for heaven, right? For the eternal song there. And so the longer time goes on, the more the Lord tarries. The song of faith is evolving, and one day, all of this evolution across countless generations, where there have been arguments about style and whatnot, all that's emerged, it'll all finally make sense because we'll be singing the Not Yet song. But he's refining us, I believe, along the way creatively to get toward that. It's all part of that purification of the bride.
Did you say the Not Yet song?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That needs to be your book. You need to write a book on that.
I'm the last person who needs to write a book, let me tell you.
The Not Yet song.
You go write that one. You're a much better writer.
Wow. Thank you for that. But that's such an amazing concept. I mean, the song we see in the book of Revelation, the song, Holy, 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 it's the Lord God Almighty. So we know we'll at least be singing that theme, if nothing else. That's a powerful thought.
And the fact that God is always singing over us.
Zephaniah, I know, man.
I know. And what must that really, we see evidence of what that song means, but to actually hear it.
Okay, so I have another theory. Man. This is a day of theories, but I have a theory about Zephaniah 3:17 and the fact that I've personally, as we started NCS, we're moving into our 4th year now, and as I've put out there through webinars, and I have actually personally conducted over 800 individual phone calls with people interested in our boot camp. Right?
Interesting.
And
that's awesome.
Every one of them, you guys, without fail, every one of them have said that they're totally passionate about being a songwriter, that they know God has something greater for them, and they just want to get their songs out there, right? There's just like common things that people say, and these are great things. And I used to think, wow, can this many people really feel all these same things? And I've begun to believe that we hear the echo of the Lord singing over us, that there's something in our spirits. We hear the echo of Zephaniah 3:17, that the Lord is always constantly singing over us. And this thing that all these wonderful, I believe they're totally called, every single one of them, whether they ever do anything with it.
Right.
I believe that they are all passionate. I believe that God really did create them to be heard because He wants to be heard.
It's a great thought, John. I'd love to sit and just meditate on that for a while, because that is, I think you're onto something there. That's brilliant.
Well, I kind of put that together with Ephesians 2 that says we are His workmanship. And in the Greek, it's really poema, which could be poem or song or lyric. I think we're all hearing stuff from Jesus. I really do.
Yeah.
I feel like just there's an echo. I don't know how else to say it, but there's an echo of the voice of God that we hear in our hearts. And that's what creates this longing to write. And like I said, I used to think, wow, are you really called? Are you really passionate, and I've begun to believe, okay, they really are. This isn't just a whim or a fantasy. They're really trying to follow this inner thing, this echo of God singing in and over them.
I think it was C.S. Lewis. I just saw this quote on Facebook the other day, and I think I may be butchering this. I think it was C.S. Lewis who was attributed to it. That says, melody picks up where words fail us in our prayer life. And man, I've thought, regardless of who said that, and I hope I'm attributing the right person to it, but I've thought about that a lot this week, just going, man, I know there are times for me when words fail me as a songwriter, and I sit down at the piano and call it whatever you want to call it, the divine download happens and a new melody comes out of nowhere. Undeniably, some of the most moving moments of private devotion I've ever had with the Lord have been in those moments, and the melodies are here and gone.
Sure.
I always go, man, why didn't I have a tape recorder going?
Turn your phone on.
Exactly. But I think you're right. And again, I just come back to what an opportunity for songwriters, but what an awesome responsibility.
It totally is.
Man, it's weighty.
So you're going to be with us in April, hopefully the first of many times you're going to be a clinician with us, and you're going to be digging deeper into this whole concept of the fusion, if I can use this, of the modern worship with deeper hymn-like components.
We'll unpack it practically, a little bit more. That's a good way to put it. The fusion there, the hybrid, if you will, it's the ancient future thing.
Yeah. Dr. Weber. That was Dr. Weber, yeah.
Yeah. We're always landing there as a people, whether we realize it or not. But I think there's something really unique going on the song level. So it'll be fun. I want to say to you too, man, first of all, to you, I think what you're doing here to inspire songwriters for the faith is one of the most noble things I've ever seen anybody leap out and do in a long time, because I think it's timely. God's always had his poets. He's always had his songwriters. But man, now more than ever, we need people writing their faith and sharing it. And likewise, then, anybody who's listening today, I want to encourage you to sign up to become a part of this intensive and become a part of this community, because I think it's a really unique thing. And I know from hearing you, John, God's doing amazing things in your life as a result of this specific calling, which makes me believe that there are people out there who just don't want to miss being a part of that same kind of thing in their own lives. Maybe you're teeter on whether or not they would come to be a part of this. Man, do it. Jump in, all in, because the blessing you're going to receive for just being obedient to God's calling upon your life as a creative, you can't there's no value you could ever ascribe to that, join us, be a part of it.
No, thanks, Craig. And this is a high-end event, and yes, it's my event. I'm the guy, I'm the guy behind the curtain, pulling all the levers and stuff. But we have top shelf industry influencers, people that have been at this for a long, long time, such as you and me. And
when you were telling me earlier, Cindy Morgan, Mays, these people are all people. Like, I want to be them when I grow up. You know what I'm saying? Honestly, they're just giants, not only in terms of craft, but just giants spiritually as well. And when you weigh what people will pay for this against like the Story Conference, which would in many ways be the same thing, but just without the gospel attached to it, people are paying $2,500, $3,000 to be a part of having an opportunity to be with people of the same caliber as a Cindy Morgan or a John Mays or a Tom Jackson or Kenna West. That is unbelievable. So, personally, I think the value financially is way under what people are going to experience there. Not because I'm going to be there, because trust me, I don't know what I'm doing on any given day. But those people,
not true,
man. They're not only going to sow into your life musically, they're going to sow into your life spiritually just by virtue of who they are.
It's true.
They really are. And you, John Chisholm, are you kidding me? The songs that you've written that have shaped the church and people's lives down through the years, to have a chance to be in the room with that guy, really?
Well, God bless you. You're very kind, but I know the caliber of our clinicians and our coaches and people that have written and had global songs, many, 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 many songs.
Yeah.
David Baroni is an amazing songwriter and coach. Kenna West, she writes for Curb Word. over 30 number one songs and counting. I wrote with her last week. Just crazy talented woman. And she's hilarious too. Kenna.
Great story.
She is on fire. She tells the greatest stories about her grandma having Alzheimer's and touching the window to see if it was cold or hot outside, and just brings tears, every time, but amazing downloads of craft. If you come to the intensive, you're going to experience 3 powerful days of input into how to write at a level that could touch the world with this passion, this message you feel like you've got in your heart, as well as meeting people like Kenna and John Mays, who works with Lauren Daigle and Jason Gray and John Medea. Great people. This is John Mays alone would be worth coming to this thing for. I mean, he has been one of the top, if not the top, Christian A&R guy in this town.
And is there a nicer
for 30 years
Christian human being on the planet?
I thought I was his best friend until I found out that everybody felt like that.
That's very true. That's very true.
I thought I was the only one, but it's like, no, he loves everybody. He's just
but genuinely so.
Genuinely.
It's not a game with him, man. He's the real deal.
And Cindy Morgan tells a great story about how when he signed her to her record deal, this is back in the 80s, right? And how he was so not hard on her about her songs, but he was a stickler, right? I mean, he really called her to a higher level of songwriting, and he loved her, had a great vision for her art, but was not going to do a record until she wrote the breakthrough song. Right. And she tells a story of packing up her little Volkswagen to drive from Nashville to East Tennessee. I hope I'm getting this right, Cindy, if you're listening, but how she was so, she wanted it so badly, but through her tears, driving in her little Volkswagen, just started singing out this song, and it became the breakthrough song for her, and all inspired because John, was so invested in her that he wasn't going to put out a record till she had the kind of song that could break through. So and I think that's what's happening with Lauren Daigle and with some of the other great artists there at Centricity it's John, you know, and so you get to come and hang out, with John and get to know him. He doesn't meet a stranger. Yeah. So
that's awesome. Well, it's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. So I can't wait to hear how you dig more into this. We haven't really landed on a title yet. Right. But the whole topic of the new trends in worship songwriting that can be for intergenerational worship and globally.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I think it's going to be called Write on the Black Keys Only. Or just only on the black keys with Craig Adams. I don't know, but that's awesome. It's some cool stuff. Well, Craig, thanks so much for being here. Thank you, John. If you had one thing to say to any aspiring songwriter listening today, what would that be?
I think it would be just an outpouring of where I spent my morning with a close friend this morning over a cup of coffee. Super creative guy, great songwriter, worship leader here in town, who's really wrestling over just needing to hear God's voice personally for some stuff related to ministry. But man, how many of us know wherever we're living impacts the songs we write more than we could ever possibly imagine. So I would say in the midst of the fire, think about Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, when it says, you will walk through the water and not be overwhelmed. You will walk through the fire and not be burned. Why? Because I'm your God. I will uphold you. I will protect you. If you can stay in that as a songwriter and try to keep the perspective above and beyond the circumstance that God is doing something that you could never possibly imagine. And it may not even be your story. It might be somebody connected to you. You may be walking through something because a spouse, a child, a friend, a neighbor, God's trying to do something unique in their lives, and you're just a piece of that story in a very innocuous way. Don't run from it. Be patient in it and write about it. Right in the middle of it, because there's value in that. Just right where you are. Don't try to write somebody else's story. Write yours, because God is doing something really unique.
So good. You're a deep well, so talented, so skilled, and it's just always a pleasure to be with you, Craig.
Likewise, buddy. I love you. I appreciate you.
Love you back. Hey, thanks for listening to the show today. I'm blown away with the encouragement and inspiration that every guest brings, and today was certainly no different. If you want even more encouragement and inspiration to take your songwriting to the next level, be sure to check out NCS membership over on our site at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. We're all about empowering you to become the best Christian songwriter that you can be, and NCS membership is simply the fastest and easiest way to get there. Become the songwriter that you were born to be by joining NCS membership today. I'll see you next time on the Song Revolution podcast.